Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, in the words of the great, not sure if late, at least great, maybe late great, Hank Williams Jr. Tony, are you ready for some football? Question mark.
Tom, in fact, I am. And in the words of the late, I don't think great, Hank Williams Jr., all my rowdy friends are coming over tonight. Also, there's a tear in my beer. Some other ones that I can just think of right now. We can just go in some Hank Williams if you want. Hank Williams Jr., Hank Williams Sr. But Tom, football starts tonight. And it started last week. We'll give you that. But it's, 5 straight days of college football? Like, this is one of the best weekends every single year. Top 5 weekend.
Yeah, this is like, wow, summer has started. It was like last weekend was like, okay, like maybe the kids are like jumping through a sprinkler in the backyard or something for about 5 minutes. This week is like, all right, we put in a pool, everybody in. That's that, and yes, there may be at least one team in Lincoln, Nebraska whose season is arguably already over, but for everyone else, it is the start of new and exciting. The return of a long overdue rivalry game, the Joe Buck Bowl in West Lafayette. I mean, and just Thursday is like, oh man, there's like 2 games on Thursday that I would definitely watch every second of if they weren't going right up against each other. So, I'm either going to have to drag 2 TVs in together or prioritize one over the other.
Yeah, and we will talk about those 2 games today. This episode, going to recap a little bit about what Ryan Day had to say on his radio show and in his lightning round with reporters. Do some previewing of the Notre Dame game, although we will get much more extensive in future episodes, future days. Although we only have like 2 days to go, we're going to talk about it a lot on Friday and a lot on Saturday, a little less on Sunday, but not a lot less, I'm thinking, because there's going to be quite a bit of after midnight discussions of this game as well. And so then at the end of the show, we will talk about 2 Thursday games, which are pretty fascinating and I'm looking forward to. But first, Tom, let's talk about any kind of new updates from Ryan Day. Big news, still no news on Parker Lewis, the kicker. And it's every week, hey, Ryan, any updates on Parker Lewis? And it's always no. And I think the next time somebody asks, it's like, hey, Ryan, it's just going to be no, nothing new. Or he will just come out and I'll just say it right now, nothing new on Parker Lewis. I know you guys are very, very, very wanty about news about kickers. No news there.
Well, this felt like, certainly they will have resolved this before the start of the season because obviously they recognize there's a deadline here. And, apparently not, Tony. Apparently I was giving the NCAA too much credit. Yet again. More credit than they deserved. Yet again. So, maybe. I was trying to remember when Paula Teote's situation got resolved last year. It might have been right before the first game, maybe. Like the Thursday or Friday before the first game. So maybe we hear something. I guess last year's game was on a Thursday, the first game. So maybe it was on a Tuesday or something like that. But yeah, it feels like, how hard can this possibly be? Like, what is the hang up? Like, either his transcript checks out or it doesn't. Either either he's the ability to do a one-time transfer exception or he doesn't. Like, it's not like USC can really put up a big fight considering they have brought in half of the transfer portal this year. It's not like they could be like, what? No, we don't agree with the transfer portal. That's a bad thing. So what is the issue here? Like, it's that has never been made completely clear, which to me suggests it's probably something really stupid.
You don't want to throw anybody under the bus, especially the stupid people. One of the things that came out today on social media, we saw Ohio State football department posted a Twitter video of CJ Stroud addressing the team and letting the team know that he's giving them each $500 gift cards to go get suits. for the game. Look good, play good, all of that, and that's fantastic. I wonder if this is out of his pocket, if this is just a sponsorship thing. I also wonder for the guys who are getting the suits, are they thinking like, you don't think I already, like, is this a statement about my dress? Basically, is my dress not up to your standards? But it doesn't sound like anybody else had a problem with it. Only me. You see this in the NFL all the time, like Ezekiel Elliott, like his rookie year, bought all of his offensive linemen like Gators or something like that. So this is something, this is a step above taking the lineman out to a Japanese steakhouse for sure.
Yeah, this was a very nice gesture, and frankly, whether it's cash out of his pocket to do it, or he cut a deal with whatever the place he was getting gift cards with to to have it be getting the gift cards in lieu of cash. Either way, that's money that would have been in his pocket that is not anymore, and it is a very nice gesture. The first thing I thought was, wow, that's a very nice gesture, and that's a really smart thing to do, and I wonder how many other people are going to do something like this. And the second thing I thought was, boy, you build a time machine, you go back 18 months, and you're like, here's what's going to happen. Ohio State's going to put out a video with the starting quarterback just saying, yup, I'm splashing around. I mean, I don't know if it was for all 85 scholarship guys or for the preferred walk-ons too, which gets you to 105 or whatever. But, hey, I'm splashing around $40,000-$50,000 to my teammates, and and Ohio State's going to put this out as a video. Like, you go back a year and a half, 2 years, and it's like, that would get George Dorman in town writing a stupid article about old raffles. So, yeah, it is. The times they are changing. That's probably not the first thing I would choose to do with a time machine, vis-a-vis the last few years. But it's it's a very nice gesture by C.J. Stroud. Like, that's a very, very nice thing to do. And that's we have talked about how you worry about does NIL and the gap between the guy who's getting $500 for endorsing a pizza shop in his hometown versus the guy who's getting a $90,000 truck and a $200,000 deal with some Fortune 500 company. How do you keep that from creating a rift in the locker room? Stuff like this probably helps on that front too.
Yeah, CJ Stroud out there throwing around kombucha money. Pretty crazy. It is, to your point, you've got a segment of the team that has signed up to have money from fans, basically. And it's like CJ Stroud doesn't need to do that. He's on a different level. And so there's the whole balancing act of all of this stuff. Ryan Day talked about it on a radio show. Jim Lachey was like, wouldn't you like to have like regulations and guidelines for NIL and maybe something of this? And then Lachey just keeps going on, and Ryan Day's just like, yes, I want some rules, because the rules that are in place, the NCAA can't enforce. There's guidelines. You need guidelines, because when there's gray, it's just a whole bunch of hurt feelings. But he did say, like, it's not going away. So Ohio State, you have to embrace it. Fans have to embrace it. And not everybody likes it, but it's here. It's not even a necessary evil. It's necessary now. So you have to act on it. The overall health of the team, Ryan Day talked about the balancing act of creating a tough team, a calloused team, with having them fresh for this game. We will get an availability report, I'm guessing, an hour and a half before the game, 2 hours before the game, something like that. Overall, like, I don't think there's anything major at this point. But again, we have not seen practice in 2 weeks or so. There's always a surprise, it seems, especially in this era of COVID. But no big concerns at this point, I don't think, and it's still early.
It is still early, and he was asked. The question was sort of framed as, "We know you're going to give us an availability report. Can you just give us a general sense for how you're feeling about the health of your team overall?" And and then Ryan Day went into a little bit of a monologue on how you have to balance practice and getting your team physically ready and still keeping them healthy. It was like, that's adjacent to the question, but that didn't actually answer the question. He did at one point use a phrase that was something like fully healthy or, good, pretty much good to go. So, I think we know Cam Babb is not going to be 100%. I think that's not a big surprise. So they're not 100%. Everyone's perfectly healthy. That's never how it is entering a season. But just the general tone of his answer suggested that they were in pretty good shape. And, we'll find out for sure on Saturday. Yeah, probably an hour and a half, 2 hours before. But, by the time we know for sure, we get the official word on that stuff, we are sitting in the stadium doing a pregame show. So, yeah, that is not anything that's happening super soon. And, they still have another practice on Thursday that they're going to get through, and then they'll do best Fridays in football on Friday, which is generally probably not a real injury concern. But, I think you probably also, as a head coach, don't want to... We have seen hints of Ryan Day's superstitious nature at some points in the past when he talked about not wanting to grow a beard at one point because it was bad luck last year. So, he may not want to jinx anything by saying everything is, everything's great. And only 2 days to go until the game. There's practically no time for anything to go wrong. Like, don't think that doesn't seem like something he would necessarily put out there. So, I think for the moment there's no direct reason to be concerned about anything, but just, we will all find out together on Saturday afternoon, friends.
Those are words no coach would ever say, let alone Ryan Day. He was asked, hey, Ryan, which of these second-year guys have really stepped up for you, through practice? And basically the answer is like a lot of them, because when you look at the 2021 class, it's going to go down in, I'd say history. Like, it's going to be one of those like 2013 classes with Ezekiel Elliott and Joey Bosa and Darren Lee and all of these different guys, Eli Apple, a whole bunch of first rounders, because you look at the guys that played last year as true freshmen, and now they're in their second year. They're all experienced. He said it's offense and defensive wide. It's inside it's on the line of scrimmage. It's out wide. Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison outside. I mean, the corners. He didn't even mention the corners, but you think of Denzel Burke and J.K. Johnson, Jordan Hancock. Those two guys are going to be something this year. Travion Henderson, the number of second year guys, and what he said was like years ago, 5, 6, 10 years ago, you'd look at a team with all of these sophomores and you'd be like, this is a young team. I don't think you can call this a young team, even though there's not a lot of necessarily upperclassmen per se, but it's not a young team. It's not an inexperienced team.
Yeah, it's not an inexperienced team because they, the upside of playing a bunch of guys last year when they were maybe not 100% ready, or when they were maybe not as, fully developed as you might want for a team that has the goals of Ohio State. The upside of that is, well, now you've got Steel Chambers with a full year of experience. Now you've got Tommy Eichenberg with a full, more or less a full year of experience, and Travion Henderson and Jackson Smith and Jigba and, Paris Johnson and all these guys. The clock has sort of sped up on a lot of this stuff in terms of, a second year player being maybe more of a veteran than you used to think of. You've seen plenty of great Ohio State teams loaded with really difference-making players in that second year. I mean, the Super Sophs in 1968, Rex Kern and that whole group. But that was guys on both sides of the ball that, came in and made a huge difference. 2014, that team had a lot of second-year players that were real difference makers. Ezekiel Elliott and Joey Bosa and all those guys. It is a little bit different than it used to be because, now when you have guys who are in their third year, a lot of them are thinking NFL. Jackson Smith and Jigba, it feels like it wasn't that long ago that we sat there and watched him in that first practice of the spring and went, oh, this guy's going to be really good. And now he's, potentially 15 games away from being done with his career and off to the NFL. You go from Travion Henderson has played 1 year. He was a freshman starter. He's got one more year, and then that'll probably be his last year. Like the clock just goes so fast. CJ Stroud this time last year hadn't thrown a pass yet, and now he's 15 games away from being off to the NFL. So, the clock kind of speeds up a little bit because if it doesn't, you end up with like Dan Wilkinson, who redshirted as a freshman, and then they went, that was a big mistake because he's only going to be here 3 years and we just wasted one. So that's just, I mean, that is kind of the changing nature of college football right now, where, between the transfer portal and guys going off to the NFL and, with the caliber of players that Ohio State brings in, they're going to be off the NFL a lot earlier than most teams players on average. You almost feel lucky to get 3 seasons out of a guy at this point between the transfer portal and NFL and all the other stuff.
Yeah, around after the game of in the middle of October, Travion Henderson's career will be half over. Like, he will be at the middle point of his Ohio State career, and you could probably say the same about like a Marvin Harrison as well. These guys where you've only seen so much of them, but yeah, 3 years anymore is a lot, and it's more than you get out of some guys who, as you said, redshirt as a true freshman, and then 2 years later, like, you're going to get 2 years out of C.J. Stroud. Although that's one more year than they've been getting out of their starting quarterbacks for the last few years, so that's twice as much as you got out of Dwayne Haskins, and so you're fortunate to get 2 years from Justin Fields, and it's that's just the way of the world right now. Tom, anything else from day to day before we maybe move on to some Notre Dame stuff?
I guess 2 quick things. One, he talked on his radio show very briefly. They have changed from a Wilson football to a Nike football, and that to me was a little weird because Wilson is based in Ada, Ohio, so you have for a long time that was the fun, sort of the fun, warm-hearted story. Oh, the footballs are made right here in Ohio by good old hey, there's real Ohio State fans making the Ohio State footballs, and what a thrill it is for them to watch that. And now they're made at Nike. So I don't know. Maybe there's Ohio State fans in China. I don't know, but that's different. They said functionally it's the same football. It doesn't really make a difference. So whatever. So therefore, keep an eye on that one, I guess. And if people are complaining, if the first time a ball slips out of C.J. Stroud's hands, just wait for that controversy to blow up. It'll be great. Second thing that was kind of interesting was Day talked about just the challenges of just kind of like being focused on the game when there's so much other stuff going on around town. Because, sometimes you'll hear teams talk about the fact that in a way it's easier to be the road team because you're just in a hotel. You don't have people, you don't have your whole campus around there to, spot, see your guys and come up to them and as you're walking across the oval and say, hey, good luck on Saturday or, whatever. With this, you've got so many people in town, is LeBron James coming in town? Is, college game days here? And, they've got, that can only mean one thing, Tony, a celebrity guest picker from the state of Kentucky. It'll be great. Can't wait. Can I remember his name right now? No. Is it because I have never heard of him before they announced that this week? Quite possibly. Doesn't matter. Anyway, but Day talked about the challenges of all that stuff, plus for him, the recruiting, all the recruits in town, just all the hoopla, all the, it can be a distraction. So, just the challenge of staying focused with all that other stuff going on, because like all the other stuff is great. And, how many times have we heard people say, you come to Ohio State to play in a game like this. This is why you come to Ohio State, not only to play in a game like this, but if you win a game like this, because it positions you so well for what your ultimate goals are this season.
What you've got to be careful with is Brian Day. I assume he's going to be on set at game day. The guest picker is Jack Harlow, Tom, a famous musical artist, probably like right in the wheelhouse of Ryan Day's son, RJ. He has to be careful not to introduce his son to somebody on game day, because that could become an NCAA infraction if he were to recruit his son, as what happened with Micah Parsons back, a few years back when Micah Parsons was introduced to Kirk Herbstreit, and they basically had to say, well, we can't recruit you anymore. So it'd be really heartbreaking in the Day household if introducing him to, say, a Jack Harlow or Kirk Herbstreit would then not allow Ryan Day to recruit his own son to his school. Perhaps, could tear apart a family, is what I'm saying.
I'm not sure that was specifically what he was worried about with distractions this weekend, but maybe it's possible. It's possible.
I may have been reading into too many of the words he did not say. One other thing he mentioned, the balance on offense that he would like is 250, 250. I would have preferred he said 219, 320, something of that nature. Like, as long as it's not 220, 220, every single game, then we're good. Let's talk about this Notre Dame game for a few minutes. And like I said, we're planning to do a stream on Friday afternoon. We will definitely talk about it there. And then a big pregame show where we will definitely talk about Notre Dame there as well. So a couple of points that we can discuss here. One of them for me is, I'm reading up on these Notre Dame linebackers, and they play 3 linebackers, and their third linebacker, I think they call it a rover, and I don't know if it's too much of a hybrid, but I don't know that you can go with 3 linebackers against Ohio State, because if you do, then you're putting yourself in a difficult situation to defend Ohio State's 3 receivers. And so then once you go nickel, then, boom, now Ohio State runs the ball, and they've got TreVeyon Henderson, and the Buckeye offense just puts defenses in a very difficult spot. And the mood that you got from the Buckeyes this week, offensively, they're very excited. The running game is more determined than ever. Everybody's excited to see the defense. I made my pick. I sent my staff pick into Mark. I feel like the more I hear from the players and the coaches, and the more I think about it, like, they are more confident than my pick is. That's for sure. But when you just look at it, like, defending this Ohio State offense now, it's going to be a tough ask. And yes, Notre Dame has a really good defensive line, but how do they handle that run pass thing that is going to be a difficult matchup for them?
Yeah, I think the real question to this game is how much can Ohio State run the ball on Notre Dame? Because if Ohio State can't run the ball on Notre Dame and Notre Dame can make them one-dimensional, I mean, I think this is plausibly a game. This is plausibly a one-score game in the fourth quarter kind of thing. If Ohio State can run the ball a decent amount, they don't have to be gashing them for 8.5 yards a carry. If they're running for 5 yards a carry, 5.5 yards a carry, I think this is as pick your poison in offense as you can get. Because, I mean, to your point, like, yeah, you can probably stop Ohio State from running, but that involves really selling out to stop the run potentially. Unless the Notre Dame defensive line has a substantially bigger advantage over the Ohio State offensive line than I think they do, that's going to involve, allocating some assets to that run game. And those are assets that Notre Dame probably can't afford to allocate given what Ohio State has in the passing game. So, yeah, it feels like if Ohio State's running the ball for 5.5 yards a carry, Ohio State's probably winning this game by, you're probably in the neighborhood of covering the spread, maybe even a little more than covering the spread. If they can run, even more than that, or the defense is a little better than some of the advanced statistical systems are sort of projecting right now, that's where you get into like, oh boy, this is, this one is, it's the end of the third quarter and Chris Fowler's already talking about the Sunday game because, the Saturday night game is already over. Is Chris Fowler calling the game? I haven't even paid attention.
I think, don't him and Kirk Herbstreit, do they call the game? It's tough for us, Tom, to follow all of these TV broadcasters. But yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. That difficulty of just matching up with the Ohio State offense is, I think it's a lot to ask. And the running game, especially, that's going to be key. I asked Ryan Day, what is a successful day running the ball look like for you guys? And he said they have no expectations. All you want to do is win. But the quote was, I like the plan we have going in. And the key thing about running the ball is that then you control the game. You can control the clock if you want. You can hurry to the line and let it burn. You can just dictate the pace of the game. And that's something that Notre Dame is going to try to do as well. Because, Tom, if Notre Dame is running the ball well, then Ohio State's offense is on the sideline. And that's the worst place for Ohio State, and it's the best place for Notre Dame. I'm wondering how much Notre Dame tries to milk this, because as Ryan Day said, they expect Notre Dame to start off running the ball, to try to establish the run. And not only does that, if it works, it's great, but if it works, then you're keeping Ohio State, the offense, off the field. And I think Marcus Freeman, a Jim Tressel disciple, a Luke Fickell disciple, they will win a game like Pat Fitzgerald will win it. They won't have to like they will let the game come to them a little bit, and they'll also try to keep it away from Ohio State. And that's probably because you don't want to get into a shootout with the Buckeyes.
No, and if Ohio State gets out front 14-0 in the first quarter, or it's 17-3 in the middle of the second quarter, well, that kind of limits Notre Dame's ability to do that kind of thing on offense. So there feels like there's a couple different stats that, if you could tell me this, I would feel pretty confident in telling you, more or less telling you how the game's going to go. Yards per carry for Ohio State versus Notre Dame would be one of them. If Ohio State's running for 4.8 yards per carry, Notre Dame's running for 5.2, that means, well, Ohio State's not dominating the ball on the ground. And then Notre Dame is running enough that they probably can keep the score down. And, then I'm maybe picking Ohio State to score something in the high 30s, something like that. And then you get into 31-24, 31-28 kind of territory where you're one play away from losing the game. The other thing is, tell me how many drives Notre Dame has of 9 plays or more, and how many points they get at the end of each of those, or number of points. How many drives they get, and how many points do they average at the end of each of those? Because if you've got 6 of those drives and you're kicking field goals at the end of them, like, that's not that big of a concern. If you're scoring touchdowns on 4 of those 6 drives, well, then that's how Notre Dame wins the game. If you really control the ball, control the line of scrimmage, keep the Ohio State offense off the field, and you punch it in the red zone, that's how Notre Dame wins this game. So I don't think that's going to be how this plays out. And we can give our score predictions, I guess, a little later on. But that feels like that's the recipe for Notre Dame. Outside of like B+4 in turnovers, that feels like the recipe for Notre Dame to win.
Yeah, I was on a radio show in Illinois last night, and they were talking about the recipe type of thing. And I think you'll see maybe Notre Dame just not allow, but the ball, Ohio State will be able to move the ball between the 20s. And then once it gets into the red zone, that's when things really get serious. And if you can hold Ohio State to a field goal on every possession, that's a win. If you keep them out of the end zone, it doesn't matter if they score all 11 times in with the ball. Like if they're all field goals, yes, Ohio State is probably going to win like 33-20 or something. But if you just keep them to the field goals, then things get really, really interesting.
Can you imagine how angry Ryan Day would be at the end of a 13-point win over a top 5 team? Just absolutely furious, like Urban Meyer in the postgame after beating Michigan in 2017 with the cameraman with the camera case that banged into JT Barrett's leg, basically turning into what's his name from Taken, just give me back my quarterback. I can't fathom how angry Ryan Day would be if they kicked 11 field goals. I'm going to take the under on 11 field goals. I will, in fact, take the under on 6.5 field goals for Ohio State on Saturday. I think, in fact, in our bold prediction show, I had them scoring touchdowns on each of their red zone trips. It's a little aggressive. That's why it's a bold prediction. But I think if Ohio State is able to be balanced and they can run the ball reasonably well in short yardage situations, and they can, obviously throw the ball, that's I think where Notre Dame's going to have issues in the red zone. Is you do get into kind of a pick your poison situation there where, yes, the back line is sort of a 12th defender for you, but still, Ohio State with that amount of talent in that amount of space, there's so many options for them, and it feels like that's going to be, that's going to be a very tall order for Notre Dame to lock Ohio State down in the red zone like Oregon did last year, for example.
Then what happens after 11 field goals? You have to shut Noah Ruggles down for a week due to hip soreness. And then the first question after the game is, Ryan, any word on Parker Lewis? Let's go ahead and throw our picks out there, Tom, so we can discuss the couple of other Thursday games that we want to talk about. My score, I went with 35-20. And that's just 5 scores to 4 scores. So that's not a blowout or anything. That's probably involves Ohio State failing in the red zone, maybe at least once. But I think 5 touchdowns is a pretty good day, even though it's going to be 10 points below their season average. you score 5 touchdowns against this Notre Dame defense, I don't think you can be upset about that. And then holding Notre Dame to 2 or 3 field goals, that after 1 or 2 field goals, Marcus Freeman needs to stop kicking field goals. I think I'm not telling him what to do, but field goals aren't going to win this game, I don't think.
Yeah, I had looked after I sent in my pick. I didn't look at the advanced analytics until after I sent in my pick, and I looked at SP Plus, who has Ohio State winning 35-23. Tyler Shoemaker, who I had on the morning show last week to talk about his system, he has him winning 36-22. So it's kind of right in your area. I have it 42-21, and I think that's a little bit more of they get ahead, and they get ahead by enough that Notre Dame has to start pressing. Because this is not a game where Notre Dame is going to be, just happy to be there, and we'll just keep it respectable, and then we'll see if we can survive and win the rest of the games, and then we just have one close loss. Like, it feels like they've got to, if they're down 14 points in the third quarter or fourth quarter, they're going to have to start taking some chances, because I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball just up and down the field against Ohio State. And then you have a first-time starter, hostile environment, road game, defensive coordinator who's throwing all sorts of new crap at him that he hasn't seen. Like, I could see this being 35-21, and then there's a pick six in the fourth quarter, and that gets you to 42-21, something like that, where you put a young quarterback in a tough, hostile environment, show him some stuff he hasn't seen before, and there is plenty of talent in that Ohio State defensive backfield that knows what to do with the ball in their hands, and can turn one mistake into 6 points the other way. So I think we're in the same neighborhood, but it may get a little more lopsided at the end.
Yeah, no, we are like the exact same neighborhood. It's just I have them failing on one red zone trip and you don't. Basically, I mean, that goes right along with your bold prediction. They're going to score in there. I'm wondering how much Ohio State goes for it on fourth down this year. It feels like there's Ryan Day, I think, is going to continue to do that, even with a kicker that he trusts. But in the next couple of weeks, when the opponent is lesser, I will start asking him about the analytics portion of this. Like, when do you decide to kick long field goals? Because I think that's an interesting discussion. But
stay off the west side. That's my beat.
So there you go, Tony. Yes. All right. Well, then you deal with it. Now let us discuss 2 really cool Thursday night games. Tonight night games. I mean, we're in like 5 hours, the backyard brawl. So Tom, we got to turn this thing around. Like, we got to drop this, give people a chance to listen to it, to let them know how smart we are before this game, or we can wait until after the game and then predict, quote unquote, predict how things are going to go.
Put a box in front of our mouths, blurring it out, and we'll just dub in the final score. Pitt 17, West Virginia 13. Like, wow, he nailed it exactly. How did he see that coming?
Yes, this is the first time since 2011 West Virginia and Pittsburgh have played. The game is 7 p.m. on ESPN tonight. Panthers a 7.5 point favorite in this game. They have not beaten West Virginia since 2008. They've lost 3 in a row. So it has been 5,025 days since Pitt has beaten West Virginia. This is a fascinating game because you have 2 former USC quarterbacks going against each other. JT Daniels at West Virginia, Keaton Slovis at Pitt. I think the key here, though, is that Pat Narduzzi has gotten rid of that creep Mark Whipple, the offensive coordinator. He sent him off to Nebraska, and you've seen what happened, Tom. You've seen it. You've seen it, what happened. Well, you saw what Mark Whipple did with that Nebraska offense. Things are going great, and then, you know what? You saw it. That onside kick that I'm going to blame Mark Whipple just because that's what Pat Narduzzi would do, so that's what I'm going to do. But overall, I'm taking Pittsburgh in this one. I think just enough offense. I think Keaton Slovis has proven himself. They got a bunch of defensive guys back. They've got their top 3 rushers back. All 3 guys have rushed for over 500 yards last year. So I did see somebody tweet out that, watch Pat Narduzzi finally run the ball as much as he wants and then lose to West Virginia doing it.
Yeah, Pitt is favored by a little over a touchdown, 7.5 points in this one. Yeah, I mean, West Virginia, I thought for sure when Neil Brown came up from Troy, I was like, all right, Give it 2 years, and he's going to have that thing humming. And he just doesn't really have that thing humming, and you wonder how much of that is the Big 12 is just such a weird fit for them as a school, and it probably gets a little less weird when Cincinnati joins, and you've got a little bit more of a neighbor in that conference, because right now I think the closest team to West Virginia in that conference is like 1,000 miles away, something like that, 800 miles away. So, yeah, I mean, the West Virginia program has just kind of like stalled out the last few years. But in general, like, man, I'm so excited to see this game again. Like, these are the games I want to see Texas and Texas A&M play. I want to see Pitt and West Virginia play. I want to see Missouri and Kansas play. Like, all these rivalries that got sacrificed to conference realignment, like, all right, it's time. Bring them back. You just play this game every year. It doesn't matter. Pitt, Penn State. Like, if you need to, play Pitt, Penn State for 2 years, and then play Pitt, West Virginia for the next 2 years, and just take it, alternate it. That's fine. Like, whatever you want to, but these are games that need to happen. I've told this story in the podcast before, but I have only been to one game in Morgantown, West Virginia ever, and it was the 2007 West Virginia Pitt game, which is, it's essentially like, well, I was only at Ohio Stadium once, and it was the 98 Michigan State game. Like, oh, no, you have a vision of that as a very depressing place. It is, this is just, it's a great rivalry. It is a long overdue for this thing to be back. And, I mean, honestly, the best thing that could possibly happen would be West Virginia beating Pitt, like upsetting Pitt and, really just, having the, like a very pro forma Pitt win over West Virginia of, they're favored by 7.5 and they win by 8. Like, yeah, okay. I mean, that's fine. It'll be cool to see it, but just bring the rivalry back with just something really crazy. That would be a lot of fun, but I don't think it's probably going to happen.
Yeah, if this game was in Morgantown, I would really, really think about taking the Mountaineers. I was there for the 98 Ohio State game. It's a cool place, but West Virginia loses their top 5 tacklers. Pitt offense loses Jordan Addison, but they have other guys, and we'll see how they do. The worst thing about the backyard brawl is that it's the same night as Penn State at Purdue. We only get to watch an hour of West Virginia Pitt before we have to turn to Penn State at Purdue, 8 p.m. on Fox. Penn State, a 3.5 point favorite on the road. You don't just walk into Ross-Ade Stadium.
You don't need to tell an audience of audience of Ohio State fans that you don't walk into Ross-Ade Stadium. They know. Don't worry.
I'm foolishly on the Purdue bandwagon on this. I'm always going to doubt James Franklin. That's my baseline. Especially to start the season, I am doubting James Franklin. This is a huge game for Purdue that if they win, then they won't be ranked, but people will take them more seriously. Because if they lose, then it's just like, it's Purdue. It's another year where Purdue does something like that. But Purdue won, 9 games last year? They should defend their home turf against a Penn State offense that has not been able to run the ball in years, still has the same quarterback they've had for years, and they do have some pretty good receivers. Purdue loses David Bell, Milton Wright, their 2 best guys, but they still have 3 guys who had over 30 catches last year. Can either of these teams run the ball? Purdue's offense is better, but if Penn State can run the ball, then they're going to win. But I'm still taking Purdue. It's straight up, I will take Purdue to win the game, knowing that not the smartest thing, but I'm on the bandwagon right now.
Yeah, these are 2 teams that you could pick either one and then go, I don't feel great about it. And it feels like that's kind of the second half of the sentence for no matter which of these teams you pick. I mean, this is a close game. All the projections have it. It's a 3.5 point line in favor of Penn State. All the projections have it as a 4-ish point game in favor of Penn State, which is, if you get a 4-point game, that is one tipped ball, one bad bounce, one silly coaching decision away from swinging the other direction. So I don't think you can have a real high degree of confidence in this one. Penn State has better talent overall. I mean, you mentioned David Bell being gone. George Karlaftis is gone too. If George Karlaftis is on this Purdue team with as shaky as the Penn State offensive line has been the last few years, I mean, the last decade really, that might be enough to kind of swing my thinking on it. I don't have a real high degree of confidence in either one of these teams right now for various reasons. This is one of these week 1 games that it's a big game now, and it's going to feel like a big game. It's a Fox national broadcast, Thursday night prime time, yada yada yada. But I think you'll kind of forget about it by the end of the weekend. But it feels like by November, this is going to be a loss that has knocked whichever one of these teams. This loss is going to knock someone down the standings and kind of out of the East or West Division title picture. Penn State cannot afford to take an early loss when they have Ohio State on the schedule, when they have to go to Michigan, when they have, you've got Michigan State at the end of the year. Penn State can't afford to take an early loss here. And the West is pretty wide open, and, probably it's Wisconsin, but, there's no one in the West who's definitely going to run away with it. And, if Jeff Brom has a good season, that Louisville job may open up again. So this would be a good year for Jeff Brom to have a good year. So this is a kind of like a low-key, there's more riding on this than you might think kind of game.
I know people have already written off Nebraska, but I will just remind people they are still undefeated in America.
A new line in the standings in the Big Ten. Merca. 0-0.
All right. Anything else, Tom? I think that's going to do it for this episode. Like I said, we've only got a short time to get there and a long way to go and a short time to get there for the games tonight. I'm excited. It's going to be fun, and it's been a long time coming. So, Tom, anything else before we go?
Nope. Just make sure if you are listening on your podcast platform of choice, make sure you're subscribed to all our shows, and also hop over to YouTube. You're going to want to subscribe there too. You don't have to watch everything there if you're going to listen, but man, we have some pregame shows. We got some live shows coming up. It is going to be a very, very busy weekend. You're going to want to be a part of it. So make sure you subscribe to our channel at YouTube. Just search for Buckeye Huddle over at YouTube, and you will find us.
Well said, Tom. So that will do it for us. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.